8 Creepiest Unsolved Missing Mysteries from Washington, U.S. Unsolved mysteries are always unsettling, but it's especially scary when you hear about the cases that are close to home. Washington has been home to plenty of unsolved crimes and incidents, some of which are downright baffling. The most famous disappearance of Washington may be D.B. Cooper, but except for him, we still have many other famous unsolved missing cases in this state. Number 8. Beverly Ann Cummings. Cummings was last seen in Federal Way, Washington early in the morning on July 18, 1990, when she went out to run errands at the grocery store and the post office. She said she would be back by 9 a.m. to babysit her granddaughter, but she never returned and has never been heard from again. When her loved ones checked the post office and grocery store, they discovered the mail hadn't been collected and no one had seen her at the store. Over Labor Day weekend in September 1990, Cummings's brown 1977 Toyota Celica hatchback with the Washington license plate number UKM 353 was found abandoned on a Forest Service road 3.5 miles off Highway 410 in Greenwater, Washington. A man admitted to finding the car and driving it to Auburn, Washington. Authorities stated he wasn't a suspect in Cummings's disappearance. Greenwater residents said the car had been there since mid-July. It's uncharacteristic of Cummings to leave without warning, and she left behind all her makeup and clothing and hasn't used her bank accounts or credit cards since her disappearance. She was healthy at the time of her disappearance, her marriage was happy, and her family can't think of any reason she would want to leave. Her case remains unsolved. Number 7. Christopher Hart Bridgman Jr. Bridgman was last seen in Thurston County, Washington on January 1, 1963. He was having a visitation period with his 6-year-old son at the Barrett Motel on Martin Way East when he left the child alone, saying he had go to see his father. Bridgman never returned and has never been heard from again. 2 days later, the hotel manager took the child to his uncle's house. Bridgman's children initially believed he had abandoned his family willingly to seek a career in the music industry. At the time of his disappearance, he was a country singer and guitar player, and had a hit song that frequently played on local radio stations. Investigators no longer believe he left of his own accord, however. The Social Security Administration doesn't report any earnings for him since 1963, and none of his loved ones have heard from him in the decades since his disappearance. Bridgman's father claimed to have filed a missing persons report for his son, but there is no record of it. A report was eventually filed decades after his disappearance. Bridgman's driver's license was later found with his father's belongings. His father, who died in 1993, was known for having a bad temper and possible mental health issues. Some members of the family believe Bridgman Sr. murdered his son and buried the body in his basement. A 2005 search of the basement, however, turned up only animal bones. Bridgman's disappearance remains unsolved. Number 6. Pamela D. Bennett. Bennett disappeared from Clarkston, Washington on August 31, 1998. She lived on Beachview Boulevard in the Riverview section of the city, and it appeared as if she left home in a hurry. The back door of the house was unlocked, expensive rafting equipment was lying out in the backyard, and nothing was missing except Bennett's car and her dog, a 2-year-old Vizsla named Daisy. She also hadn't asked anyone to water her plants, which is uncharacteristic of her behavior. There was a confirmed sighting of Bennett at a mailboxes etc. store in Pullman, Washington a few weeks after she disappeared from Clarkston. She was reported missing by relatives about 3 weeks after she vanished from Clarkston. Her dark green 1995 Ford Mustang ragtop was found unlocked and abandoned in the parking lot of the Zona Ria Plaza Mall in Tijuana, Mexico, with the keys still in the ignition. There was no sign of Bennett or any foul play at the scene, but the vehicle had been wiped clean of fingerprints. At the time of her disappearance, Bennett was divorced and dating a man she knew as Joseph Blake, whose real name was Ronald Reagan. He dropped out of sight on July 23, 1998, over a month before Bennett did, after police got a warrant to search his van for drug paraphernalia. On September 3, just days after Bennett's disappearance, police discovered the remains of a methamphetamine lab in Reagan's home in Lenoir, Idaho. He had put a $10,000 down payment on the home over a year earlier, but had defaulted on the payments prior to his disappearance. Police determined Reagan had been the financier for the lab, which produced $13 million worth of high-quality methamphetamine for sale in California, about 20 to 30 pounds every week. It's unclear whether this had anything to do with Bennett's case, but she is known to have visited the Lenoir residence several times. She had confided in her best friend that she suspected Reagan was involved in the drug trade and she wanted to end their relationship. Reagan and a male accomplice were arrested by Drug Enforcement Agency officials at the San Francisco International Airport in 2000. There were unconfirmed reports that a woman was with the men at the time but escaped from the airport. Police believe this woman, if she existed, could have been Bennett. Reagan was convicted of possession of 2 pounds of methamphetamine and died in prison. He never revealed whether he knew anything about Bennett's disappearance. Since Bennett's disappearance, she hasn't used her credit cards or social security number, or contacted any family members. She was declared legally dead in 2007. Her case remains unsolved. Number 5. Rita Marie Barcott. Barcott was last seen on the morning of August 24, 1990, working in the yard at her deceased mother's home in the 5500 block of 31st Avenue Northeast in Seattle, Washington. She has never been heard from again. When a neighbor checked on the house, she noticed the television set was turned on, the cat had been left without water or food, and the coffee pot was full of coffee that had turned moldy. The neighbor reported Barcott missing. Drew Richard Thompson, an unemployed landscaper, was charged with using Barcott's debit card on September 7, 2 weeks after her disappearance. A photo of Thompson is posted below this case summary. He withdrew a total of $3,200 from her accounts. Following his arrest, police found another of Barcott's bank cards at his home. Her vehicle, a blue Honda which had disappeared with her, was found near the University of Washington campus on September 9. There was blood in the backseat. DNA testing was not very advanced at the time, but forensic experts were able to determine the blood could have come from Barcott in only 11% of the Caucasian population, and Thompson was excluded as a source of the blood. Several hairs found in the car's backseat were microscopically similar to Thompson's hair. He had 5 felony convictions prior to Barcott's disappearance, and authorities described him as a professional thief. His fingerprints were found inside Barcott's vehicle, and he admitted to having stolen and driven it after her disappearance. Thompson pleaded guilty to first-degree theft in relation to his withdrawals from Barcott's accounts. In May 1991, he was charged with her murder. 2 of his former cellmates testified at the trial, saying Thompson had told them he killed Barcott and the police would never find the body. He was convicted of first-degree murder in November 1991 and sentenced to 32 years in prison. He continues to maintain his innocence, and will not be eligible for parole until 2022. Foul play is suspected in Barcott's disappearance due to the circumstances involved. She worked as a professor of chemistry at Columbia Basin Community College in Pasco, Washington at the time of her disappearance. Number 4. Tracey Elizabeth Brazzel. Brazzel was last seen at approximately 1:45 a.m. on May 27, 1995 in Everett, Washington. She was departing from Kodiak Ron's Pub in the 12,200 block of Airport Road at State Route 99 South at the time of her disappearance. Her white 1993 Ford Probe with a Washington license plate number 081 GDL was discovered 3 days later parked half a block from her residence in Keeler's Corner Apartments in the 4,500 block of 164th Street Southwest in North Linwood, Washington. The passenger window was broken out, but there was no broken glass present. There was a small spot of blood on the passenger door. The car had been driven 25 miles since the last time Brazzel put fuel in it. Authorities located evidence that suggested she made it back to her apartment after returning from the bar. She has never been heard from again. Brazzel was employed as a hairstylist at the Great Clip Salon in Mill Creek, Washington in May 1995. She quit her job on May 25, 2 days prior to her disappearance, and never picked up her last paycheck. Her mother stated that she had a close relationship with her daughter in 1995 and said that Brazzel visited her daily. Brazzel's loved ones told authorities it's uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. Extensive searches of the surrounding area produced no clues as to her whereabouts. Brazzel's parents are divorced and her father resided in New Jersey at the time of her disappearance. In May 2011, authorities announced they'd identified Danny Ross Giles as a suspect in Brazzel's disappearance and in the murder of Patty Berry, a 26-year-old woman who disappeared in July 1995 and was found stabbed to death a week later. DNA had linked Giles to samples from a blood-like spot on the exterior of Brazzel's car and the crime scene in Berry's case. Giles was charged with the murders of both women in December 2012. A photo of him is posted below this case summary. He later wrote a jailhouse letter in which he denied having anything to do with Brazzel's disappearance, but admitted having been in her car and apartment, supposedly to buy drugs. Giles was convicted of Berry's case in November 2014 and sentenced to nearly 50 years in prison. After his conviction in Berry's case, the charges against him in Brazzel's disappearance were dropped. They were dismissed without prejudice, meaning they could be refiled in the future. Several unconfirmed sightings of Brazzel were reported in 1997 after her father appeared as a guest on The Oprah Winfrey Show. Foul play is suspected in her case due to the circumstances involved. Number 3. Linda Sue Endorf. Linda was last seen on December 8, 1976, after she finished her shift at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport and left for home at 10:30 p.m. She worked as a ticket agent for Western Airlines. She was supposed to report back to work on December 15, but never did and has never been heard from again. On December 17, more than a week after she was last seen, her husband James reported her missing. Linda left behind a 13-year-old daughter. She and James had married in 1963. 2 months after she was reported missing, James filed for divorce. The divorce was finalized in 1978 and he got almost all their property and assets, as well as custody of their daughter. As far as authorities could determine, Linda never used her social security number, never had contact with law enforcement or any other government agencies, and was never seen by anyone after December 1976. In January 1993, James's second wife, Deborah Ann Endorf, went missing. A day later, her body was found in the trunk of her car in Tacoma. She'd been strangled with a bungee cord and had a fractured skull. James hired an attorney and refused to cooperate with the investigation into Deborah's murder, even in its early stages. A month after her death, he committed suicide by gassing himself in his truck. He left a note, which didn't confess to involvement in either Linda's disappearance or Deborah's murder. The police closed the homicide investigation after James took his life, stating he had been their prime suspect and they had planned to file murder charges against him. Deborah had told others she mistrusted her husband and feared he would kill her. Authorities found bloodstains on the garage door in the couple's home. They believe she was attacked there. The investigation into Linda's disappearance was renewed after Deborah's murder, but authorities couldn't find any additional evidence in her disappearance. Her case remains unsolved and she is considered to be missing under suspicious circumstances. Number 2. Joseph David Wolfgang Pichler. Pichler was last heard from at approximately 4:15 a.m. on January 5, 2006 in Bremerton, Washington, when he talked to a friend on his cellular phone. He has never been heard from again. His silver 2005 Toyota Corolla was found on January 9, 2006, near the intersection of Wheaton Way and Sheridan Road in Bremerton, half a mile from Port Madison Narrows. A photograph of the car is posted below this case summary. All of Pichler's personal belongings were left behind when he vanished. with the exception of his wallet and car keys. His apartment was unlocked and the lights were left on, which is uncharacteristic of him. Pitchler is considered to be in danger. He left some poetry indicating he was feeling depressed. He stated he wished he had been a stronger brother for his younger brother and asked that his brother be given his belongings. There is no hard evidence that he took his own life, however, and Pitchler's writings did not explicitly state he intended to do so. The friends who last saw him stated he was in good spirits while he was with them. Police theorized Pitchler committed suicide by jumping off a bridge into the Port Madison Narrows, but search dogs did not trace his scent to the bridge, and his family does not believe he was depressed or suicidal at the time of his disappearance. His loved ones believe Pitchler may have met with foul play. Pitchler began acting at age 6 and lived part-time in Los Angeles, California until 2002, pursuing acting jobs. He has been in many commercials and television shows and has also played significant roles in several movies, including The Fan, the third and fourth movies in the Beethoven series, and Children on Their Birthdays, and he has also done voice-over work. He was reportedly unhappy to have to return to his hometown of Bremerton, but settled in nicely once he got there. He received a significant amount of money from his trust fund after turning 18 and set up his own residence, but was a frequent visitor to his family's home. 2 months prior to his disappearance, he had taken a full-time job as a telephone technician at Teleduc. He was also experimenting with drugs and alcohol recreationally. He had given up acting in Bremerton, but was planning on returning to California to begin his career again once his braces were removed. His family planned to support him in this endeavor. Pitchler is a graduate of Bremerton High School, class of 2005. He had a pet guinea pig at the time of his disappearance and enjoyed playing the card game Magic: The Gathering. He likes food from Jack-in-the-Box restaurants and Mexican food, particularly chips and salsa. His disappearance remains unsolved. Number 1. Lindsey Jo Baum. In early summer 2009, Melissa Baum and her 2 kids, Joshua and Lindsey, were living in the small Washington town of McCleary. The family was hoping to make a fresh start after Melissa divorced from the kids' father and moved to the Pacific Northwest from Tennessee. Lindsey, Melissa's youngest child, was an itty-bitty thing, always buzzing around and talking a mile a minute. She was a mama's girl who hated being out past dark. She'd scribble stories on napkins at restaurants, commenting to her mother how one day, the books in her overflowing shelf would be her own. The sun was blazing that fateful Friday as Lindsey spent the afternoon at a friend's pool, swimming and gossiping about what middle school would be like in the fall. She had just finished the 5th grade. Her 11th birthday was fast approaching. Lindsey and brother Joshua stopped at home quickly, then walked with a group of others to another nearby friend's home. Lindsey had asked her friend to sleep over, but the girl's mother said another night. So Lindsey left for the 10-minute walk home alone. It wasn't long before Melissa knew something was amiss with her daughter. Without word from Lindsey, Melissa called the home of Lindsey's friend. The friend's mother said she hadn't seen Lindsey in more than an hour. Melissa tried to ring her daughter's newly purchased cell phone, only to discover it was accidentally left home on its charger. "I just knew something was wrong. I got that feeling right then," Melissa said. She called 911, an officer came to take a report. Melissa assured officials that Lindsey wasn't just a kid who wandered off, so they launched a search. Lindsey was nowhere to be found. Officials knew this was not a simple case of a runaway young girl. "We were sure she was gone because of a criminal act. This young girl didn't simply run off on her own. There was no evidence to support that," Sheriff Scott said. Agents from the FBI's Seattle office arrived Sunday, and soon dozens of them were assisting on the case, along with hundreds of police officers and searchers, according to Sheriff Rick Scott. "Every day, we had the command post going. Behavioral analysts were brought in," remembers Sheriff Scott. "As time went on, we sort of took over City Hall because we needed a bigger place to work out of." The day of her disappearance, Lindsey got into an argument with her brother, and she was reportedly stressed over her parents' divorce. She left her money, clothes and cellular phone behind, and she's afraid of the dark and doesn't like to be alone at night. Police checked her computer and her internet history, but found little of interest and no evidence that anyone Lindsey communicated with online could have been involved in her disappearance. Lindsey's father lives in Tennessee and she hadn't seen him for about a year prior to her disappearance, but they maintained regular contact by phone. Her father, a member of the Tennessee National Guard, was scheduled to be deployed to Iraq in July 2009. Both Lindsey's mother and the father of the friend she was visiting that night volunteered for and passed polygraph tests. Lindsey is described as an intelligent, talkative and mature young girl. She wanted to be an author, illustrator and veterinarian when she grew up. She was last seen at 9:15 p.m. on June 26, 2009. Her case remains unsolved. If you enjoy video, please subscribe my channel. Thank for watching.